Good evening once again. After completing the most contemporary topic of digital and how it impacts DEI, we are here with the theme 4 of the Summavision 2021. It is all about classical or classic discussion about culture versus business. So we are excited to introduce the moderator and the speaker of the panelist. The name of the theme is the Kung Fu situation between business and culture for Summavision 2021. I request Parul Soni, who's the moderator for the session, and also founder and global managing partner Think Through Consulting and co-creator of Samavision 2021. Over to you, sir.
Thank you so much, Vishal. I think this is a great time when we are talking about a very good topic on DNI, which is diversity and inclusion. Why this topic is important is because if you look at globally, I always say DNI represents the rainbow and the colors and the creativity of colors, the creativity of living beings as such. We're all different. That's why we're talking about in this present state with this thinking of DNI as such. When the world is talking about COP26, we are talking about various aspects. We are also struggling with COVID-19, new variants, and others, but not losing the focus on our business perspective, the business thinking of how we can make our workforce, our people, our cultures more diverse. And from that perspective, I feel this entire effort of creating more inclusive cultures, inclusive organizations are very, very important from that perspective. And today, I'm so glad and very happy to introduce my favorite, I can say favorite, panelists who I've worked with, who I'm working with, and I'm really proud of them because these are the people who are my ambassadors. They are the people who are really heroes in their lives, who have changed various countries, who have been, in with various organizations as such. So I want to start with Tanya. Tanya works and heads NetWest DNI initiative based out of India. And Tanya has worked with a not-for-profit organization. She has worked with Coca-Cola. She has come back to NetWest, and I feel that she will be in a position to talk and discuss various aspects about how she's helping NetWest evolve in this entire thinking of DNI. I have, Rezani, my very good friend and a corporate leader of Sri Lanka. She's based out of Sri Lanka. She's the CEO of Ad Factors, a communication professional with more than 30 years of experience. She is a women leader. She has helped many organizations to progress, to prosper, and worked with the government to see what are the new initiatives they can bring with international organizations like USAID, IFC, and the World Bank. And very proud of you, Rezani, that you're doing great work, and I'm very happy that you're joining us. It's late in the evening, but it's great that you're here. Our third panelist, Angie, and Angie, great. Thank you so much for joining in. She is a corporate leader, entrepreneur, a great personality, and she's based out of Bangkok. And she runs a very successful company called Cryovia, which is a company which is a stem cell a company, and it's one of its kind in Thailand. Before that, she has been very successful in positioning and giving leadership to large organizations in Thailand and also in the US, studied both in Thailand and US. And she brings in the whole perspective of the Mekong region, including, Singapore. And that's the variety which we are bringing in this panel. My last fellow panelist, my again very favorite good friend, is Rabih. And Rabih is, with great struggle, he's joined today because of the technology, because we were hearing that he was facing a lot of problem. But Rabih has come with a lot of experience on sustainability. He has worked in Africa. He is now building a green wall in Africa with bringing more a green cover in Africa. And he's also the global ambassador of ABWCI. And, I must say both Chiranya and Rezani are, Rezani is our president of ABWCI in Sri Lanka, and Chiranya is our Mekong president for ABWCI. So, welcome to our fellow panelists and also my great friends. And that's what this we will be making. We will stick to our time and we will close on time because I feel that panels have to start on time and close on time. We'll have two questions and two parts of the question to each panelist, 3 to 4 minutes maximum, and we can start now. Tanya, the first question to you. As we are moving into a globalized world as India, what do you think when you started your journey as a professional? What was the time, what was the situation at that time, talking about gender, then transforming into DNI, and the situation at present, and the situation in the future? If we can talk about that's the first question, and your time starts now. We have 3 to 4 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Parul, Soni. It's interesting that I feel really privileged to be a part of a country which is rich in tapestry of culture, heritage, diversity. But at the same time, the reality is that we deal with multiple division and prejudices that are ingrained in our social fabric for many years. Personally, for me, as a woman who have had a professional career for close to 21 years, my diversity and inclusion journey started at the age of 7, when at every social gathering, in the train, in the bus, in the school, when I will socialize, the question that comes to me, oh, you don't have a brother? You're two sisters? And I quite often wonder, what is this question all about? Because I couldn't make sense of this question in my own 7-year-old brain. So I came back to my mother and asked her, why do people start talking about brother? Why don't they inquire about my younger sister? I keep telling them I have a younger sister. And my mother responded saying that unfortunately in the Indian society, the brothers grow up, they get a job, then they start financially supporting parents, and therefore people are keen to know if you have a brother, but you don't worry about it. You can be financially independent yourself. And that is when my determination as a woman in India started of being financially independent. And of course, there was a long story after that. And then I joined the corporate educational sector as well as NGO. I became a mom. So at that point in time, and it's almost like 15 years ago, where people were only talking about including women in the organization, which was more important. And women were talking about leaving organization because they had the syndrome which I called mom martyr. The moment you become a mom, you are filled with so many guilts and you feel that it is important for you to sacrifice. And I told myself that sacrifice is not something that I would tag to my mom journey, neither to my professional journey. So, in this context, the reason I'm sharing this personal story is this is the story of every woman in India. And in this context, building a workplace culture that is truly diverse and inclusive is by no means an easy task. And why would diversity and inclusion at the workplace happen? Because it is importantly very difficult. There is no specific legislative obligation for employers in India. India does not have a comprehensive standalone anti discrimination legislation place or policy. Of course, I'm sure you're aware of the Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act in 2016,
Correct.
Transgender Persons Act 2019. They are there. They are effective law. However, the awareness and the scope of the obligation with employers is still work in progress. So,
Yeah.
and that is where we are
So,
right now.
Tanya, from that perspective, when you started your journey, personal journey, you spoke about, when you now come into this job, which is NetWest,
Yeah.
and you have been just been awarded for your DNI initiative, what have you done differently? And what
True.
was missing?
Yeah, what was missing was, I feel inclusion is a trained skill. What was missing was a conversation at the business table about diversity and inclusion. But what I feel proud of is increasingly corporates are all galvanizing their efforts towards gender balanced workforce, facilitate disability smart friendly workplace, knowledge about non binary gender identities. Earlier it was a huge social stigma till the time the law enforcement happened. And now I see and feel very hopeful that organizations are actually formulating policies that are gender neutral. Today I work for an organization which has got gender neutral policy and a whole lot of benefits for our LGBTQ plus colleagues. And we welcome them in the organization. And that has changed. And the reason that has changed is because marginalized sector and marginalized individual have actually positively agitated towards that. And forums like yourselves, policymakers, lawyers, activists, corporate executives have all come together and took up the challenge that we want to make a change happen for the society and for the corporate. So I
No,
feel
great.
very, very
Yeah.
hopeful about the future.
No, Daniel, this is great because what you're talking about is a sea change. You
Yeah,
see, where we started and where we are. I think more companies will progress, and I through NHRDN and through ABWCI and the work which we are doing, I think we want to go back to them. We want to help them
sure.
understand the whole perspective of bringing that kind of change. So I welcome you from that perspective that the change you are bringing in the championship is really really good from that perspective as such. Oh, great.
Thank
So
you.
I'll come back to you with second question as such. I'll go now to Rezani. Rezani, from your perspective, I have the same question because you are in Sri Lanka, and why we chose various countries were basically talking about the whole aspect because Indian subcontinent, from the Indian subcontinent, Tanya spoke about the India perspective. From the Sri Lanka perspective, when you started as a communication professional, now you are a CEO of a company. What has changed and what kind of things you are bringing in from your perspective as a CEO?
So sure. So thanks, Parul. And firstly, I want to just emphasize that the situation or the conditions in Sri Lanka are not much different to that of India. We are less of a patriarchal society, but when I started off, I started off in broadcasting, actually, to be very honest, and that was my communications journey. I remember I was interviewing. Um, he was a managing director of a national bank, and on the subject of women in the workforce. So at that time, I'm talking of like 30 years ago. The topic was, of course, women in the workforce. And he turned around and said, and this was on air on national radio at the time. He said that he was reluctant to employ women because employing women meant they get pregnant and they have babies, and they take 3 months maternity leave. Thankfully, the 3 months maternity leave is now 4 months and 10 days. 30 years later, a small
And
step.
6 months in India.
That's so, see how it has evolved. But
Yes.
that was a huge problem to him. He was airing out his biggest concern that was keeping him sleepless at nights. Employing women was a huge issue. So from that, obviously, it's come a long way. I have to say that incorporating LGBTQ and so on is important because it's it's. But let me tell you, here in Sri Lanka, it's still illegal. I know it's all legalized in India, but we don't have laws that recognize them yet. But still, in the industry that I am, definitely we are far more um, open and accessible to everybody, I would say, and we equalize everyone. Women, I'm harking back to women in the workforce is still an issue, but corporates have made it a point to encourage maternity and by starting creches, and so policies are the things that need to change to include that. And to me, LGBTQ is very important, but we also have to recognize that inclusivity also includes pregnancy, maternity, women, race, religion, belief, in addition to sexual orientation. So the mindset has to include all of that. That's how I feel.
And that's nature, Rezani, because the thing is, nature has made us all different. And when we are talking about the difference of opinion, the culture, the diversity, the thinking, the minds, all that is important. And people have to understand at some point of time that if we have to become or make things inclusive, we have to broaden our perspective. And that's the perspective we are talking about in DNI as such. So I think this is what we feel is important from the perspective of bringing that kind of change. One a subset of this question is you're a communication professional, and from the perspective of communication, what should we do which should bring in the sea change to say that, okay, this campaign has changed the world, and this was like, for example, Me Too. Okay,
Sure.
somewhere it has brought some kind of change where people are today scared. Okay, at the mindset is different. I'm talking about the strata which we are talking about, the companies as such. What should we do which will bring change?
So right now, I'm not sure whether our South Asian countries are ready to initiate. I still see a very thin line between coming out public and being risking discrimination. I just feel what I think would work. So social media has also evolved. I think storytelling would be the best way to showcase it. And again, um, we have so ESG governance and all that has become huge fashionable topics here. Awards are being given, and if corporates and I mean across the board, any company has embraced uh, the whole DNI aspect in totality, I think the best way is to portray it on social media. I mean, just a storytelling campaign, a testimonial. That's how I would see. Have those who are in it talk how great work life is in that particular company, showcase that particular company. It's a simple thing, and everybody's doing it. I mean, they have birthday parties, and everything is a billion people can see it instantly. Why not use those platforms to come out? Simple but more effective. I
No,
think right now.
very good point, I think. And I feel that these small things, using social media, storytelling, bringing companies to talk about it, each company representative and short films, I think this is a good idea. And after this, this entire summit, we are with the organizers, we are planning that every quarter we will bring the DNI insight, a kind of a newsletter which will be helpful with the help of companies as such. So I think this is a good point. I think we'll come back to you. But thank you, Rezani. I'll now go to Chiranya, Angie. Angie, the question is the same, and you have understood the question.
Yeah.
Is when you started, now you are a mom. It's all now from the perspective of when you were going for your first job, and now the present situation. Now you are the CEO, you are the decision maker, you are taking decisions. What was then and what was now in the Mekong perspective, and you have worked internationally, and what changes you are bringing in your companies to see that what Rezani was talking about, kinds of people, kinds of diversity, kinds of minds we have to bring in. That's really important as such. So to you.
Thank you, Parul. And good evening, everybody. An honor and a privilege to be here. I'd like to go back a little bit and, a similar experience to what Tanya went through, although slightly different. I grew up in a family where my mother was a working professional running a large organization in the 70s, which was unheard of in Asia, in many, many countries. So as a family, I grew up seeing women succeed, seeing women in a position of power and authority and running businesses. So we were brought up to understand that it didn't matter whether you were male or female. It's what you intend to do and how far you would like to go and make something out of your life. So having started off with that perspective and from an education perspective, in the U.S. since the 80s, where there were fewer Asians there, having the opportunity to have the best of East and West, and then coming back and starting a career here. I think that the difference between then and now that I see is that obviously there were fewer women. Obviously, there were fewer women who were educated with a Western education where opportunities were beginning to come about. But as I started off my career actually in a consulting company where we were helping to build organizations and restructure organizations. So the understanding in terms of diversity and inclusion came from a very different route from very early on in my career. But as I went into leadership positions, I think the key component in Thailand and more in Myanmar, Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia, the less developed countries that I went into, was how do we ensure that there was a sense of belonging for everybody? And that didn't mean only in terms of gender, but in terms of wherever you were in terms of the organization itself, whether you were at the top, whether you were in the middle management, whether you were down the line, how do you bring that sense of, belonging into everybody and to acknowledge, and honor the multiple differences, the cultural practices, even the religious beliefs, because in most of these countries you have a mix of a lot of different religions because we're melting pots in a way. And you've had Indians, you've had Chinese, you've had different people who've settled in these countries and moved on based on the changes in the political situation. So the religious and the cultural practices came along to have a very important role along with the gender part. And in terms of fostering a company culture where every voice is not only welcome, but it has to be heard and respected. Because my thought was always that regardless of who it was, the value that each individual brings to the organization in the position they hold is very important because the expertise you acquire is very different. The specialists you have at every level, how do you make those people valuable? How do you make them feel that there's value? And what we also tried to do, because we had different people from different backgrounds in different countries coming in and assisting us in the different projects, respecting those different cultures, the language issues. So we like many Japanese companies, we try to learn a little bit of the local language where we go. What is the culture like? Because culture in this part of the world, especially when we were working with Western people, is very different between the Indian culture and the Thai and a lot of those. There are some similarities, but we had a lot of Western people coming in. And as we were growing, how to open the dialogue on the meaning of inclusion, the meaning of diversity, the meaning of gender equality. And in a country like Thailand, where the third gender, the LGBTQ was accepted a lot longer than in many countries, because this was the capital in terms of sex change for many years.
Yeah.
So there was a much higher tolerance in this country than when I crossed the border to maybe Cambodia or Laos or Myanmar. Vietnam has a similar culture to Thailand, so we had less issues there. But then the multilingual, the multinational issues, how to handle all that, and foster the diverse thinking based on people coming from different backgrounds and having them share the the valuable experiences they had coming from those cultures and creating a sort of melting pot of our own, and eventually moving in to eliminate the biases that you would have in the evaluation
Yeah,
process,
yeah.
promotion opportunities, and strengthening those policies of that were anti-discriminatory, whether they were, obvious or whether they were less obvious.
So things have changed. You see
Yeah.
from the perspective of where you are and how things are. I think you
Yes.
have given a good perspective because Thailand and the Mekong is much open compared to other countries in the South Asia as such,
Yeah.
and that's a perspective. It's a learning for many as such. So I think
Yes.
that's a good perspective. Now let me go to Rabih because Rabih, you bring a different other perspective as a sustainability consultant, and you are planting trees and Great Wall of you are the Green Wall of Africa and all that. And I see diversity with nature, with trees, different trees, different trees growing and all those kind of things. As we have people from various parts of the world, from your perspective, yes, you started because from where you are or where UK was and where Europe was and where today UK and Europe is. Throw some light on your journey and the thinking that what is happening today.
First, thank you very much, Farrell, for having me as a friend, as colleague, and as well part of this interesting panel. It's very difficult to explain this, especially on the gender when you are not a female, because it's you need to go through a very different experience than the typical male experience for you to understand the other gender. That is, we're talking about the female gender. Let me start very briefly of my personal experience, and I will tell you about the whole sort of journey through my travels and my sort of work. I mean, I mentioned that to you before. My father passed away when I was just 14, and I was raised by my mom. And I do come originally from the Lebanese community, which is a typical Middle Eastern where everything is paternal. The male is the one in charge, and the female is more no more than an add-on those days, unfortunately. And to be honest with you, that is not just in this region or in the Middle East region. It's here in the UK, where I've been living here for nearly 30 years. It's everywhere. Unfortunately, it still is. We are trying to hide it, but it still is. It's improving dramatically, but it still is. And the experience that I had is the following, because suddenly I was raised by a female that was as wise as any man you can even meet, more brave than most of men that I met in my life, extremely intelligent. She was selfless. She was very inclusive. She was extremely fair. She was in the charity work, and she was logical, emotional, capable, all sorts of things, which is I do. And this is what is required to be responsible. For you to be a human being, to be honest with you, in charge, and to be in charge of holding the pen, which, to be honest with you, they say who holds the pen holds the power. Here I'm seeing someone in my journey that deserves to hold the pen. Meanwhile, the society, the community, everywhere else is still the same. And my journey continued, and I traveled, and I was very lucky to travel around the world, Africa, and of course here in the UK. And you'll see the same thing. And I think the only issue that I feel it's missing, I still, in my view, we're still troubleshooting. And I mean by troubleshooting because we're trying to go and fight to get a legal system slightly here to be changed, and talking about maternity or thinking poor as if women are poor or the diversity is something else. And we try just to bring it in as an add-on rather than seriously integrated. And I believe the major problem that we face as a human being in general, I don't think we suddenly woken up to say, hold on a second, we need to stop and to revalue our existence and the ingredients of that existence and who's who. And that is extremely important exercise, very difficult exercise. So you need to start to ask the question: what's the value of myself? What's the value of my dad? What's the value of my wife, my sister, my mother? What's the value of my neighbor? What's the value of my doctor? The value of my bin man? The value of my pet? The value of the tree? The value of the soil? The value of the dust? And everything is actually part of a network, and that is the most important element here. And the irony is, you will hear someone talking about, equality, and at the same time they act differently. And I think all of us, including, funny enough, the female gender, including the able people, including the different whatever capability they are, we still act in a system that is being written, focused in a different way. I think we need to rewrite exactly how we're going to value things. And I will explain to you later on in terms of where is that journey on the sustainability. I mean, to talk about the UK very briefly, allow me to say that
Yeah,
from the
please. Yeah.
1800s, if I go, I'm talking about from the Black Friday, from the time when the National Insurance Act happened, when the British Society to study the sex and psychology, from the time when John Richard Archer, the son of a black Barbadian, he became elected mayor of London, and all this up till today, we still have a journey, and unfortunately, we are doing things in small doses. We are not quantum leaping. It's what is required, and funny enough, what is the green or the green economy requires. So the green economy require completely revaluing everything ASAP, urgently. Funny enough, nature is telling us there's a climate change. But
Correct.
in
I was just coming to COP26 saying that when people are now thinking very passionately to say that, definitely the climate change and the temperatures are rising and all, the same situation is, Rabih, happening now with the whole culture diversity. We have blacks in the US struggling to say that, listen to us. We are the people who are basically the people who are making America great. It's not the other way around as such. From that perspective, I'm not cutting what you were saying, but I'm just saying very passionately that the time has come to bring that kind of change, which is the change of today. So I'll go back to now, Tanya, I want to go back to you now. Listening to our panelists from various countries, what should we do in India which should bring the value to a level where we are really at the epitome to become successful?
Well, it's very difficult question, I must say. And the value is defined by a culture of a place, and culture is a collective of how we communicate, how we make people feel, how we drive performance, how we provide responsibility and make people accountable, and how we respond to challenges. We have just come out of COVID, right, recently. And also in my corporate stance, I would say, how do we run our business? How do we treat our customers? And all of this is built with the value will be built with patience, energy, and time. And there is no compromise on that. There is absolutely no shortcut. And that is where I love the title of our session, which says kung fu, right? And I would say kung fu that takes for business to build an organizational culture that is truly diverse and inclusive.
No, no, that's Tanya. My other thing is that, which we want to discuss, that I have always been a hard believer that run organization like all our family. If you can help treat people with that kind of sense of togetherness, the
Yeah.
feeling of being together, listening to them and have patience. Like, in the last session, people talking about, if there is a problem, then address it. If they have a problem that, they are not coming at 9:30, they'll come at 11:30, they're going late, no problem. Understand the problem, understand what they want to do, and do it. So it's not everyone is equal. So from that perspective, I think I hear you from that perspective. Now I think I'll give 2 minutes to each panelist to say the final words. Starting with Rezani. Rezani, as you said, your campaign, which you're talking about, the campaign of the future, bringing companies and all that, that's a great idea, and it will not take a lot of money. But from that perspective, now maybe we will be coming to you on this. So I think it will be great from that. So your last 2 minutes to
Yeah,
sum up, and then we'll go 2 minutes to Angie and 2 minutes to Rabih, and then we'll
sure.
close. Yeah.
So I just want to say that D&I should not just be lip service. It just as Tanya said, the value has to be created. Okay, it's among corporates, even among countries. So there is a shift I can see in South Asia, in lots of parts of the world, a shift to a kind of nationalism and all that. All that creates um, da, it creates a divisiveness. So getting beyond that is also a challenge. So it's up to the people, like what was said earlier by Rabih and so on. I think Chiranya also said we have to embrace everyone, and
Correct.
I know it's an ideal situation, but I think the mindset starts with you. The sea change starts with the person. You have to be accepting of everyone, see the merits in them rather than the demerits.
No, definitely a great point that the acceptance is the way of bringing change. Chiranya, your final comments.
Personally, for me, I think it's just a few points that I'd like to raise here is what's very important is inclusion has to be ongoing.
Yeah.
It's not a one-off training. So how do we keep the momentum up throughout the organization and ensure that we have an empathetic leadership? That's key. So that it's not only a question of portraying it in the boardroom, but how do we make sure it goes down? And at the same time, there's also a bottom-up approach to have that sense of urgency as an ongoing thing to ensure that diversity and inclusion is part of a corporate culture. For me, that those are the key points that
No,
I like.
very good points. I think this is a great point to understand that how this is, and it is a good point from that perspective. So great. So Rabi, from your perspective, now you've heard and very good points which you brought in, but because of the paucity of time, I told I took over on COP26. But my thinking is your final 2 words.
Yeah, I think I'm focused as you were now at the moment in working on regeneration and transformation, and the main ground is the southern part of the hemisphere, in particular is Africa. And when I'm looking at, I hate to call it the green wall, should be called the green spine. Actually, it's it's you look at the solution to develop that place. The only solution, funny enough, is to bring diversity into play. And I'm talking about a multitude of diversity. I'm talking about from an engineering point of view, not just from emotional point of view. The multitude of ingredients, they play very well in terms of timely and at the same time in terms of the life cycle assessment that is required. Otherwise, we will lose sight because what created climate change, if we go into climate change, is singularity,
Yeah.
and that's the key to it, and that's what we need to be aware. Our way of life, our way of acting, our way of working should be on the basis that diversity, inclusion is a key.
Correct. Great. Great. Thank you so much. Tanya, if you have final 2 minutes, I'll give that minutes to you, and then we will say bye. Yes.
Thank you. My final comment will be there is no greater disability in the society than the inability to see a person as more than their gender, color, creed, faith, age, and physical abilities.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we hope to build a world where everyone belongs irrespective of their abilities and not isolated, to
Yeah.
have the opportunities and not favors that we are doing to them, to feel needed and not person with needs, and most importantly to have responsibility and not just rights. because only laws can't fix it. It has to be human care that will fix the problem of inclusion and diversity.
Great, Tanya. I think with your final words, we'll wrap up. But the thing is, we have already created a group where we can be in touch with each other. Lot to learn from our global leaders today. Chiranya, we have Rezani, Rabih, Tanya. Thank you so much. What is important is that you brought in the whole global perspective of your personal journeys and what you are doing as such, and that's really important. I think Vishal and Aman, we will not have time for questions as of now because of the reason that you're running late, and it's also time for dinner for our panelists and also for our audience as such. So these questions, what we can do is we take down the names of the people, and if you have contact details, we can get back to them with these answers, and maybe talking to them on this, because my feeling is the journey has just started. It's a long way. As Rabih is saying, we have to evolve. As Chiranya is saying, we have to get involved and we have to get the momentum, and that momentum has to carry on. If the momentum is not there, if we break the momentum, we will lose out. As what we're seeing in this entire climate change, there will be another calamity, and that will be very, very devastation for our world as such. We have to make a world a better place with diversity, cultures, and the belonging of being together. So thank you so much, each one of you, for your time. I know you are all global leaders, but on my invitation, you all came. Thank you so much. It will be great for you, and we'll do something. And I'll come back to you to see that we contribute on this entire topic, which is DNI. Thank you so much. Thank you.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank
It's
you.
a pleasure.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank
Pleasure.
you.
Weekend, everybody. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Have a great weekend. Bye.
Thank you, Parul sir. Thank you, everyone. With that, we are at the conclusion of the panel 4 of the discussion. I request all the participants to join back for the last but the most important session after this. Thank you
Thank
once
you.
again,
Bye
everyone.
bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye-bye.